You're listening to On the Docket.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Docket. My name is Joelys Hernandez. I'm a senior associate at LoPalo Shkolnik, and today with me I have Chris.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Chris LoPalo. I'm a partner at LoPalo Shkolnik, and I'm here today with Joelys.
So, hi, Chris, and we're going to talk today about hidden dangers, everyday products that cause harm. And so I wanted to start talking about culture and community and how, as a society of law and order, we usually use products as a custom. We don't think twice about it. It's on the shelf, so it should be safe, right? And that's not necessarily the case. We know that it's happened with a number of products, but specifically I'm thinking of talcum powder products, hair relaxer products, other type of products that people use on a daily basis that have been shown to cause harm. And here at LoPalo Shkolnik, we have litigations for those types of products. And I want to see, Chris, where you're at with that. What do you think about the litigation for those types of products?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Joelys talcum powder, and talcum powder. We've been involved in litigation for over 10 years now against Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of the talcum baby powder. And I think that's a product that almost everybody has used. Whether you're a female, males use it too, but everybody uses it, right? Their moms, their grandmothers used to, use it on starting as babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You rub it all over the babies, right? It's good for the skin. It smells good. It was, manufactured by Johnson & Johnson, right? A company that has, the reputation for being into health, right? Everybody, trusts Johnson & Johnson, right? They think that they put products on the market like baby powder, that it's going to be safe and that there's going to have no risks, no side effects. And even the name baby, right, just has that innocent name, baby, right? Everyone thinks that it's going to be, so safe, right? And with talcum powder, it was on the market for a long time. I think since the late 1800s, it's been on the market forever. And, nobody knew that that could possibly cause ovarian cancer, right? It was only until, really recently, within the past 10 years when it really became, public information that, hey, there's a association of talcum powder and ovarian cancer. When, we started to get involved by looking at a possible causation, reading the studies that cause the causal association of talcum powder and ovarian cancer, and we started to get a lot of clients coming to us saying, "Hey, I used talcum powder for many years, and I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer."
Yeah. So the
it's shocking.
consensus between people coming is, I never knew, right?
Yeah.
My mom used it on me when I was a baby. I used it since I was 15, and it was marketed as something that you did for hygiene, right? You want it to be clean, you want it to be dry. You're a young woman coming up in your teenage years. You want to take care of your babies. And so that's why you never thought twice, because marketing was such a present thing that it's a good product to use. And we know that clients usually repeat that over and over. I never knew. I never knew. So that's where litigation comes in, right? Chris, you were mentioning that we looked at the studies, and that's when the cases started to be filed, and they're currently going on, right, in the MDL and in federal court.
Yeah, they're currently being litigated in federal court, which is in New Jersey, is the MDL for the talcum powder litigation. But there's also cases in state courts around the country. We have trials coming up in California starting in November, in a few weeks, and also in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. They have trials starting in January for ovarian cancer linked to talcum powder. So it's amazing that that product is just one example of a product that was over the counter, and everyone bought it, everyone used it, and there is a high prevalence of ovarian cancer that's associated with the use of talcum powder. There's other products as well, in addition to talcum powder, that people just aren't aware that there's some really serious risks. For example, there's the Roundup product, right? Roundup is a pesticide that people use. Uh, you know, I use Roundup, still even
Yes.
till today. There's no warning on it, but it works. It's a good product. It kills things. You put it down on the weeds, it kills it, almost instantly. And but some people like use it. Use I don't use it a lot, but some people like farmers who have a lot of property. Or people involved in some type of agriculture. That use a lot of pesticides, use a large quantity of Roundup, and there's no warnings on Roundup that it could cause, lymphoma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's a serious product,
Yeah.
that it's still out there on the market, and that's still out there on the market,
It is, and
Yeah.
it's widely used, as you said, and hair relaxer as well. We also have a
Yeah.
litigation against hair relaxer, and it's very common usage. Hair
Yeah.
relaxer,
Yeah.
you would never think about how many people use it, right? We just use it because we want to look good, we want to change our hair, and it does also cause ovarian and gynecological cancers, and people don't know. The community doesn't know. But these corporations have some idea that these things happen with their product. So that's where litigation comes in,
Yeah.
and it aims to make them responsible for their, contribution to injuring people with a faulty product that they should have known.
Yeah.
They should have warned.
Yeah.
And so that's where this litigation comes in.
Yeah, I think a lot of times these companies, they know, what these risks are. They got to make business decisions, though, when they put their products out on the market, right? These companies, they're in the business to make money. Yeah, there's some benefits of these products, right? But do those benefits outweigh the risks? That's really the question. But they have a product out there where there are some benefits, and they want to make money, right? They spent a lot of money trying to manufacture this product. They have a customer base out there that's purchasing these products. So they always have to make that business decision as to, what do we disclose, legally, right? They have to disclose almost everything, right, to the appropriate authorities, especially if it's a product that's being FDA regulated or whatnot. But at least to its customers, they have the duty to warn, about known adverse events. And sometimes they make that business decision to withhold certain information because they're afraid if they put too many warnings out there, right, or too many risks, it's going to scare away a lot of potential customers out there, right?
Yeah.
So they got to make that decision. And sometimes we see that, as we litigate, when we get those internal documents from those corporations, we see that happen a lot where they knew for years before the information became public
Yeah, the
that
famous corporate
side effects.
memos.
Yeah.
Internal emails with the
Yeah,
corporate
yeah,
memos.
the emails are the best, right? When you
Yeah.
see that there's definitely knowledge there and that they failed to disclose it to the appropriate authorities, to the public, and why do they do it? It's greed, right? They want to sell the product. They want to make money, you
Yeah,
know.
profit
Yeah.
over health.
Definitely,
Um,
definitely. So, Joelys, another product that was over the counter before it was recalled was Zantac, that had
Yeah.
a link to certain types of cancers. And Zantac was a drug that a lot of people took for acid reflux, heartburn, and it was withdrawn from the market around the year 2020 because there was a link of NDMA, right, which is a chemical in the Zantac that was associated with certain cancers, such as kidney cancer, liver cancer, stomach cancer, along with some others. And Zantac, it's almost like people are popping them like candy, if you remember. Like if you have heartburn, acid reflux, no everybody thought it was safe. And this
Yeah.
is a drug that, you know, developed into a huge, litigation because there was no warning on it that it was associated with cancer. And when that information came out, there was so many cases that were being filed, around the country, and nobody knew, and that was like a hidden risk that these pharmaceutical companies did not warn about at all. You know, and if you remember, they withdrew Zantac off the market, and then they kind of rebranded it by changing the formula, right? And it's called Zantac 360 now. That's on the market.
Yeah, and it's a different type of product, but it's still Zantac.
Yeah.
But I do remember it was so common, right? So why is it so common that something that's so easy to purchase and it's marketed as safe to use daily? Because I do remember those commercials. You take a Zantac daily and think nothing of it. People with, wanting to enjoy their favorite foods, they would take it daily sometimes for years, many, many years. So why is it so common that not only Zantac, but hair relaxer, talcum powder, these things are so easily available? Um, how does it get there? How does it make it to the shelves without us knowing?
Yeah. Well, I think that people don't know because number one, they rely on those advertisements that you mentioned, the commercials. Maybe there's online advertisements that, they hear about the benefits of this product, but they don't hear about the risks. And when you look at those commercials and those advertisements, if there are any warnings at all, they're very small, right? Very fine print, right? And kind of hidden. They don't really throw it out there at the potential customers, right? They are hidden, and when people buy the product in the stores, it's kind of again small writing, hidden, not right out there, right? It's not really an adequate warning if there is any warning at all.
Yes.
So nobody sees those risks, and people think again they trust these pharmaceutical companies, right? They've been around these big pharma companies forever. They assume that if it's in the stores, right, that it's safe, right? You're not buying it illegally on the street, right? You're buying it legally in a store. It should be safe. So a lot of people just assume.
Yeah.
And the awareness isn't there because there isn't any strong warnings out there.
So it's interesting that you say trust, because I think that they work really hard, these corporations and pharmaceutical companies, to create that trust. It's not by happenstance that people trust these companies. They work very hard to ensure that the public trusts that what they're making is a safe product. And that's where marketing comes in. And also they do have some influence on regulation authorities, right? If they know or they should have known, they sometimes say, well, I have federal rules that prohibit me from changing labels, for example. So it's something that they work very hard at creating, and that's how they get their products on the shelves without having to necessarily warn people of what they know.
Right. And I think you mentioned, you didn't say, but preemption, which a lot of these defense,
Yes.
pharmaceutical companies always try to argue is that we could not have given a warning because federal law or the FDA would not have allowed us to make that type of a warning. That's a typical defense that you hear from pharmaceutical companies. Uh, but there are ways for them to give proper warnings out there. We always remind them that they have the CBE process available to them under the FDA regulations, where they don't need the FDA approval or government approval to give a stronger warning out there for a product. Them, as the manufacturer, these pharmaceutical companies, they always have the duty to warn about the risks of the products that they're putting out there on the market. What I'm interested in, though, Joelys, is how do you tell your clients, that there's dangers out there for these over-the-counter products?
So I would also let clients know that trust that we have in the corporation and the pharmaceutical company, in the makers of a product, is carefully crafted and created by the company. And so not everybody that tells you that they have your best interests in mind always does, right? So we want to make sure that we are observant and we keep an eye out for things that could be harmful to not only ourselves but our families, our community. And listen to attorneys and people who have experience with these types of products, and important to stop using it, right? If we know that it does potentially cause harm, if possible. Sometimes it's not possible to stop using a product. For example, sometimes we don't know that we're using a product such as talcum powder. We know that talc is included in some edible products, such as gum, right? So chewing gum has talc. Before we put it into our mouths, we don't know that sometimes.
Yeah.
If at all possible, try not to use talcum powder
Yeah.
in
I
edible
always tell
products.
clients as well too, if they have concerns or even what I tell them, the side effects that I may know about a product, I always tell them too they have to speak to their doctor about it
That's
too
true.
to make some type of decision as to whether or not, like you mentioned, stopping a product, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes some of these products people are taking daily,
Yeah.
and it may not be safe to just cut taking the product cold turkey. You may have to wean yourself off it. I don't know.
Hmm.
Right? We're attorneys. We're not doctors.
Yes.
We tell them all the time. Here's some risks that we're aware of, but you should, sometimes also, get your doctor involved in the conversation so you can see what's best for you, because everybody has to make a decision that's right for them.
That's true, and it is a balancing
Mhm.
act, like you said, which is, the risks versus the benefits, and it's something that you need to decide if the benefits outweigh the risks or not. And doctors are an important part of the community and in making that decision. But also, that's something that without the warning, the corporation or the pharmaceutical company is taking that decision away from the consumer, right? You don't know. Maybe if you knew about the risk, you could talk to your doctor and make that determination. Do the risks outweigh the benefits or vice versa? But if you don't know that there's a risk, then you can't weigh that and make a determination on your own health.
All right. And that brings up, bringing the doctors into it. Sometimes the doctors were never aware of those risks associated with a product because a lot of these risks were held internally. Maybe the pharmaceutical companies knew about the risk, but if they never disclose what they know to the public, right, to the FDA, to the appropriate authorities, to the prescribing doctors, if it was a prescription drug, sometimes these doctors are like, I had no idea, that this was a risk, and sometimes they're like, oh, I wish I had known that, because if I had known, I would have, given different advice to my patients about whether it be the over-the-counter product or a prescription product.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that from doctors. I hear that a lot from clients as well. I
Mhm.
wish I would have known
Yeah.
about the risks because there was no idea that, everything this product that I use so much and that I purchase regularly on auto pay from the internet, or that I was potentially causing harm to myself. So that has stuck with me. The public does know that they can make the determination on their own. They just don't want to be taken the decision away from their hands.
Exactly. Like we're talking about talcum powder, the hair relaxer, Zantac, Roundup, right? Almost all the clients say, if I had known about that,
Yeah.
there were other options available. I would have done something else. For example, Zantac, right? There's Tums. I would have done Tums, why Zantac? So, there's other options available, and almost all the clients say, I wish I had known,
Yeah.
otherwise I never would have used that product.
Yes.
Corporations, such as pharmaceutical companies, sometimes have an influence on the perception of the risks that are associated or caused by their products. For example, I see a lot of times that the only literature out there are studies that are sponsored by the pharmaceutical company that manufacture the product. And when you read those studies and the way the studies are performed, the and how it's set up, there's a lot of bias there, towards the pharmaceutical company. Uh, what do you think about that? When you see those types of studies out there for products that you litigate, that they're all being sponsored by those pharmaceutical companies. What does that tell you about them?
Yeah, so it's part of the influence, right? Creating influence and creating the trust that we had mentioned. And it's a good strategy, right? Because you want it to look authentic. You have a scientist that's saying what you want to hear. But it's important that we keep in mind that, just as I said initially, right? Not everybody that says they have your best interest in mind actually does. And so we want to be able to possibly go to trusted sources Go online and verify if there are any recall notices or any safety notices, maybe from the FDA, from the CDC, things like that. And it's very smart what these corporations do in terms of marketing, because it does create an appearance of safety, even though they have other researches published by independent, maybe pharmaceutical companies or labs, that are against what they're publishing in those paid for labs that you're mentioning. They also, when they talk about research papers that maybe are not in their favor, they downplay the importance or the significance of the link between the use of their product and the actual diagnosis of, let's say, ovarian cancer or other types of cancers. They say there's not causation, and we go into difficult terms in epidemiology. Sorry, it's a type of science that's very complex. It's about numbers and tables and what is considered to be a nexus or a link versus causation. And they're very smart about how they handle these research topics.
Yeah, they're trying to like protect themselves from lawsuits by just, I think, formulating studies that give results in their favor. And when they see some other studies that get published out there against them, they attack. They attack. For example, I know in talcum powder, for example, there's Johnson and Johnson attacking some of the scientists who publish studies showing the causation, of ovarian cancer and talcum powder, and they're personally attacking the scientists, the authors of these studies, and there's litigation going on because of it.
They actually sued one of the experts,
They
right?
did.
They
sued.
experts.
Yeah, I think that's still going on,
It is.
and you know, and they'll do that to protect their products, But these are doctors who are independent and well qualified and respected in the field, and just because they publish a study that shows that one of their products has some risks, they're gonna attack them. That's concerning.
So yeah, it's concerning, and I agree about that. And it's important for the public to, as I said, pay attention to the regulators, right? The independent studies that are published. For example, recently the Food and Drug Administration, they did an expert panel on the risks of talc, and that was published on YouTube.
Yes,
It was a
yes, I remember
live
that was
session.
recently.
It
Yeah,
was
that was
about
recently.
an
That was
hour or
great.
so
Yeah.
of about 13
Mhm.
experts, independent experts,
Right.
that study talc for a long time. I think there was one from even Australia, right? So there was experts from all over the world, and they were talking about the increased risks of using talc not only on hygiene products, but also in cosmetic products, in foods. As I said, sometimes rice has talc because they don't
Wow,
want
I
it to
didn't know
stick
that. Wow,
together.
rice.
So yeah, be aware
Hmm.
of what's being published and the news about increased risk of the products that we're using. So, Chris, I just want to basically take it back to how the community can handle these situations when there's such risks associated with the usage of the products that we were mentioning, talcum powder, hair relaxer. And we had mentioned before the FDA panel, right? Keep yourself informed as much as possible. But also, if you hear of risks and dangers associated with product usage, let your community know as well. If you have been told that you have been diagnosed with a certain type of injury because you used talc, hair relaxer, or Zantac, don't keep that to yourself. Make it public as much as possible. Tell your family members, tell your neighbors, because it's important that we gain the knowledge to be able to defend ourselves and to make the people who wronged us accountable for the injuries that we sustained. And so it's important as well that litigation steps in to help with some of that, but it's not the only thing that's available. Knowledge is power, as we say. And what do you think about cases and the bottom line of litigation?
Yeah,
What can it
so,
do?
with litigation, it brings awareness out there to the public, right? A lot of times people aren't aware of these risks associated with the common products that we spoke about today, such as talcum powder, Roundup, Zantac, hair relaxer, right? Nobody knows about these risks until really there's litigation out there that becomes publicly available, and it gets the conversation going with the users of those products, right? It gets the conversation going with their family members, their friends, and people start talking about it way like, hey, did you hear that this is associated with this product? And their friend or family member's like, I had no idea, I use that too, and it gets the conversation going. And that's how you get awareness out there, and then people speak to groups of other users of that product, and they speak to advocates like you and I who help these individuals who may have been wronged by these pharmaceutical companies, get, a lawsuit, filed to get awareness out there and to hopefully get them, compensation, just compensation, because a lot of these individuals were never informed of the risks that are associated with these products. And, it's our job, I think, as attorneys, not just to really bring lawsuits, but to hold these, for money for our clients, but to hold these pharmaceutical companies accountable. They're making a lot of money, right? Especially the pharmaceutical companies, the big ones, right? With these big over-the-counter products, right? They're making billions and billions of dollars with their products. And the lawsuits that we bring against them are for really side effects that they knew about, that they failed to disclose to the public. And how do we hold those corporations accountable, right? The only thing we could do is, really bring really a civil lawsuit against them, right? And hopefully get a judgment against them that's big enough to deter, them from continuing to do that behavior, and maybe changing that label, where they can. They're the ones with the real power, right? They have the money, they do the marketing, right? If they actually put a better warning out there, a more adequate warning out there, that will help bring the awareness out there to the consumers of the risks associated with their products.
Yeah, agreed. And it's also important to keep in mind that compensation, there's no amount of money that could pay you justly for having suffered, for example, ovarian cancer. It's one of the most aggressive forms of cancer out there. It's one of the most deadly forms of cancer, unfortunately. It's usually diagnosed very late. And these people who have ovarian cancer, these women, they undergo a lot of very invasive treatment, chemotherapy, surgery, and so there's no amount of money that could compensate for that. But it's a drop in the bucket, maybe, of keeping the corporations accountable and getting them some form of justice, which is what we aim to do with litigation.
Joelys, I'm glad that we had the opportunity today to come here on the docket and to talk about, the over-the-counter products and to bring awareness out there to our listeners today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And to all our listeners, remember to subscribe to On the Docket to stay up to date on all our latest litigation and legal news.